My name is James, though I wonder sometimes if that name has ever really belonged inside this house. A name is supposed to carry weight, isn't it? Recognition, identity. Yet here, within these walls I have paid for brick by brick. My name floats like smoke, visible for a second, then gone. They don't say it with respect, only with indifference, as if I were a deliver man dropping off packages. Not husband, not father, just James. I thought I knew what I wanted from life. Respect, a seat at the table, belonging, the kind of belonging that goes deeper than shared photographs or family vacations. That unshakable sense that you are needed, not for what you provide, but for who you are. Isn't that what we all long for? To sit in a room and feel that if we disappeared, someone would notice? When I met Danielle, I thought I'd found that place. She was a woman carrying her own storms. Yes, but she had a softness in her voice when she first let me in. A tone that said, "Stay, I need you," and I stayed. I stayed for her, and I stayed for Ethan and Lily, who at the time were too young to see the gaps in their own lives, the shadows their father left behind when he drifted in and out like a ghost. Do you know what it feels like to step into a father's shoes that aren't yours? To lace them up, walk in them, and believe that, given time, they will fit? I told myself the blisters would fade, that eventually Ethan and Lily would look at me not as an intruder, but as their anchor. I paid for their schooling, their soccer cleats, their piano lessons. I took them on trips, carried their luggage, waited in hotel lobbies while they explored. I gave them my time, my money, my heart. But the truth is, you can pour yourself out until you are empty and still be invisible. That was my weakness. I thought love was a transaction, that if I gave enough, they would give me back a place among them. I see now how naive that was. But back then, I clung to the illusion. Every bill I paid, every roof tile I repaired, every ride to practice, I believed it was building a wall of gratitude that would one day protect me. Instead, it only reinforced their unspoken belief. I was useful, but not essential. I knew it in small ways long before the big moment came. The birthday dinners where Danielle would sit too close to her phone, laughing at some message, while my jokes went unnoticed. The mornings when Ethan would leave without so much as a thank you for the gas money left on the counter. The nights when Lily would slam her bedroom door after an argument with Danielle and whisper to her friend on the phone, "He doesn't get it. He's not my dad." Each of those moments was like pinprick. Small, sharp, survivable. But enough pinpricks over the years and you bleed. Our house, yes, I call it our, though they never did, stood in a quiet neighborhood of Columbus, Ohio. A modest two-story with white siding and a front porch that sagged a little at one corner. I'd painted that porch 3 times in 7 years. Scraped off the rot with my own hands. Tightened the railing so no one would fall. Danielle would say thank you, but it was the sort of thank you you give a handyman, not a partner. A duty performed, nothing more. Inside, the kitchen was always alive with sound. Danielle humming while cooking, the kids bickering, the hum of the refrigerator. But I always felt a silence under it all, a silence directed at me. Isn't it strange how silence can be louder than shouting? How a room full of noise can still make you feel erased. I remember one particular evening. Danielle had made lasagna, the good kind, layered with ricotta and her grandmother's sauce recipe. The kids sat at the table, phones buzzing beside their plates, and I tried to tell a story about a coworker who had accidentally locked himself in the supply closet. I thought it was funny. Maybe it wasn't. But the moment the words left my mouth, I knew. Their eyes didn't lift. Forks scraped. The story dissolved in the air, unanswered. Do you know that kind of humiliation? To speak and realize no one cares enough to respond? It's a quiet death, one that eats at you forkful by forkful. And yet, I stayed. Why? Because I believed, foolishly, that belonging could be earned. That if I was patient enough, if I kept providing, kept showing up, the tide would turn. That Danielle would take my side. That the kids would look at me with something resembling affection. I thought love was math. Add enough effort, subtract enough of yourself, and eventually the equation balances. It doesn't. The truth, which I see now but refused to admit then, was that I was raising children who didn't believe I had authority. loving a woman who didn't believe I had equal standing. I was tolerated, needed, yes, for the bills, the repairs, the role of chauffeur, but not respected, not loved in the way a man should be loved. I tell you this not to earn your pity. I don't need that anymore. I tell you because maybe you felt it too, that gnawing sense of being invisible in your own home, of giving until you're hollow, waiting for applause that never comes. If you've ever sat at your own table and felt like a guest, then you know me. You know James. And if you've never felt it, then I envy you. Because what happened next, the moment that cracked the illusion wide open, was not a lightning strike. It was the slow drip of years finally bursting the pipe. And when it came, it sounded like laughter. It happened on a Saturday, the kind of Saturday that's supposed to be ordinary coffee on the porch, tools in the shed, chores lined up like obedient soldiers waiting to be done. The sky was heavy with late spring clouds, the kind that promised rain but held back just enough to tease you into working outside. I was in the backyard, crouched low, tightening the seal of a stubborn pipe that had been dripping for weeks. The wrench slipped in my hand, knuckles scraped against metal, and I muttered under my breath. Nothing new, nothing dramatic, just a man keeping his house in order. Then I heard it. Laughter. Not the kind of laughter that warms you, that says we're happy, come join us. No, this was sharp, conspiratorial, a kind of laughter that pushes someone out rather than draws them in. It came from the kitchen window, open just enough for voices to escape. Ethan's voice, cracking slightly as teenage boys' voices do, still figuring out their register. Lily's lighter, tinged with that mocking sweetness only daughters can master when they're being cruel. He doesn't get it, Ethan said, between bursts of laughter. He just pays for everything. That's his job. This isn't even his house, Lily added, giggling. He acts like it is, but it's Mom's. He can't tell us what to do. He's not even our dad. The words landed like blows. Not new words, not entirely. I'd felt the sentiment in their silence, in the way they rolled their eyes when I asked them to clean their rooms, in the way Danielle never corrected them when they dismissed me. But to hear it spoken aloud, without hesitation, without shame, was something else entirely. I froze there in the yard, wrench still in my hand, water dripping onto the soil like punctuation. Each drop marked the truth I'd refused to face. In their eyes, I was a wallet with arms, a repairman on call, a ghost who haunted the corners of their lives without being truly seen. Have you ever had a moment where the world tilts, where everything looks the same but feels entirely different? That was it for me. The house stood just as it had the day before, the porch paint intact, the siding white, the curtains swaying in the kitchen window. But suddenly, it wasn't mine. Suddenly, I understood that all those years of sweat, of bills paid, of vacations planned and funded, they weren't building a family. They were building a wall, one that kept me firmly on the outside. I thought about walking into that kitchen, slamming the wrench on the counter, and demanding respect. I imagined shouting, shaking the walls with the rage that boiled in my chest. But instead, I stayed crouched in the yard, my knees pressed into damp soil, the sound of their laughter echoing like a verdict. Maybe silence was worse than shouting. Or maybe silence was my first act of rebellion. That night, I didn't sleep. Danielle lay beside me, scrolling through her phone until the glow of the screen faded into darkness. She didn't notice the stiffness in my body, the way I stared at the ceiling as if it might spell out the answers I'd been avoiding. What was I really? A placeholder? A temporary solution until their father decided to reappear? A man who mistook sacrifice for love? Do you know that moment when something breaks inside you, and you realize it's not the first crack, it's just the one that finally made the structure collapse? That's what it felt like. I wasn't hearing their laughter for the first time. I was hearing every unspoken dismissal that had come before, all rolled into one cruel chorus. By dawn, I knew. I couldn't stay in the role they'd assigned me. Not the invisible stepfather, not the unthanked provider. If I accepted that role any longer, it would kill something in me that no repair, no apology could bring back. So I made a decision. Not in anger, not even in grief, but in a clarity that felt almost cold. I would stop begging for a seat at their table. If this wasn't my house, then fine, I would make it not my house in truth. If I wasn't their father, then let them live with the man who had earned that title by biology, if not by presence. The thought didn't hurt the way I expected. It steadied me. The next morning, I gathered them in the living room. The air was thick with the smell of coffee, the kind Danielle brewed too weak for my taste. Ethan sprawled on the couch, Lily scrolling through her phone. Danielle perched in the armchair like a referee waiting for a fight she didn't want to mediate. "I need to say something," I began, and the calm in my own voice surprised me. "I heard you yesterday." Ethan looked up, defensive already. Lily froze, guilt flickering across her face. Danielle's eyes darted between us. "You were right," I said, letting the words hang. "This isn't my house. I don't belong here the way I thought I did, and I won't keep pretending. If you don't want me as a father, then I won't force it. You'll be living with your real dad from now on." The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. Ethan shifted, muttering something about not meaning it. Lily's eyes filled, though whether with shame or fear of change, I couldn't tell. Danielle started to speak, but I held up my hand. "I'm serious. You have 3 days. I'll help you pack. I'll drive you myself if I have to." The words tasted strange, like steel in my mouth, final, irrevocable. And for once, they listened. Not because they respected me yet, but because they knew I meant it. For the first time in years, I wasn't invisible. Do you see the irony? I had to threaten to remove myself entirely just to make them notice me. But isn't that how life works sometimes? People only realize your value when you take it away. As I stood there in the living room, watching their stunned faces, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Power. Not anger, not bitterness. Power. The kind that comes from drawing a line and refusing to cross it again. And that, I think, was the moment my story truly began. I woke before the sun and made coffee strong enough to sand a plank. The house had that hush it gets just before a storm air thick. Doors holding their breath, walls waiting to hear which way the wind would blow. I set 3 mugs on the counter out of habit, then put 2 back. Old instincts are stubborn. They stick like grease under a fingernail. You think you've scrubbed them out and then you catch the glint in the light. I had said 3 days, not 4. Not, we'll see, 3. It sounded harsh even to my own ears when I said it, but some truths need sharp edges to cut cleanly. Otherwise you end up sawing at the same old knot, fraying the rope, never breaking it. You know what I mean? At 7, Danielle came down the stairs in a robe, her hair tied up in a careless knot that used to undo me. She looked at the mug I'd left and then at me, as if the coffee were a confession. "You're serious," she said. Not a question, a verdict. "I am." My voice was steady, and that steadiness scared her more than shouting would have. Shouting invites a counter-argument. Steadiness invites surrender. She wrapped her hands around the mug. "James, they're kids. They're old enough to understand respect," I said, trying to keep the anger from rising like bile. "Old enough to joke in the kitchen about the man who pays the bills. Old enough to move in with their father." At the word father, something changed in her face. Not contempt, fear. "Peter isn't consistent," she said quietly. There it was, the name we almost never said aloud. Peter Holley, the spectral man who floated in and out with apologies like confetti. The kind of man who could light up a room for an hour and then vanish for months, leaving only the echo of his charm. He had that effervescent guilt people mistake for love. Do you know the type? "He's the one they said they wanted," I replied. "I'm giving them what they want. What they say they want," she corrected. "When they're angry, when they want to hurt you. They're teenagers, James. They test fences. I built a fence," I said. "I know where it gives." And then, softer, the real wound. "You never stood there with me to hold it up." She sat at the table, eyes on her mug, as if the coffee might organize her thoughts into an argument good enough to undo last night. If she had begged, I don't know what I would have done. I don't know if I would have folded, but she didn't beg. She measured, calculated. Danielle always did her math in silence. By 8, the kids were awake. Ethan came down in a hoodie, eyes puffy, trying to look indifferent and only managing to look 14. Lily followed, hair unbrushed, holding her phone like a talisman. They hovered near the doorway, as if the living room were a courtroom, and they weren't sure where defendants were supposed to stand. 3 days, I said. Today you make lists. Tomorrow you pack. On the 3rd, We drive. Ethan's mouth twisted. We didn't mean. You meant it enough to say it. I cut in. This is me believing you. Lily swallowed. Mom? That one word had so many questions in it you could have stacked them to the ceiling. Will you stop this? Do you love him more than us? Are we really leaving? Will you come? Danielle didn't answer. She looked at me, and the silence said, This is your decision, James. Own it. Fair enough. For the first time in years, I was. I'd pull legal pads from the drawer, one for each of them. A small, idiotic gesture office, supplies to organize heartbreak. Write what you need, I said. Clothes, books, chargers, prescription bottles. Stuffed animals if you still have them. I slid a pen to Ethan. He let it sit there like a dare. I slid one to Lily. She took it and traced a line down the pad, as if to prove a point to herself. This is real. Danielle stood and moved toward the sink, rinsing a cup that wasn't dirty. Where will they sleep there? She asked into the running water. In their rooms at their father's, I said. He'll figure it out. How quickly those words found me, and how little I believed them. Isn't it astonishing? The lies will speak just to keep standing upright. The day unspooled in tasks. I returned the toolbox to the garage and brought up cardboard boxes. The same ones we'd used 2 years ago when we moved Danielle's mother's furniture after she passed. Funny, isn't it? How grief and logistics are always neighbors? There's always tape to find, labels to write, hinges to oil. I cut strips of tape and sealed the bottoms. The rip of it loud as thunder. Ethan made a pile of jerseys. Lily made a pile of books. I watched them sort their lives into categories and wondered what category they would put me in. Utilities? Seasonal? There were scenes, of course. Ethan slammed his closet door and said he wasn't a child to be shipped. Danielle snapped at him and then apologized. To me and then apologized to the air, as if relief itself were a person whose favor she needed. Lily cried once, quickly, in the hallway where she thought no one would see her. I saw her. I pretended not to. What would you have done? I should tell you something else, because confession isn't worth much if you only scrape the surface. A part of me enjoyed the efficiency. I've always been good in a crisis. The world narrows to a list. Move A to B, wrap glass in paper, turn off the lamp, unplug, coil cord. My childhood trained me for it. My father's temper was a weather pattern we all learned to predict. When the storm came, you put the pictures face down and locked your bedroom door. And afterward, you picked up the shattered pieces and made a mosaic. Maybe that's why I mistook competence for love all my life. If I could clean it, fix it, pay it, surely it would love me back. Isn't that the oldest mistake? I broke for lunch and ate standing at the sink like a penitent. Danielle stood in the doorway with her arms folded. You're punishing them, she said. I'm giving them the life they say they want. You're punishing me, she corrected. I set the plate down. Maybe I am. Maybe I'm punishing the version of you who laughed at your phone while I told stories and didn't notice me disappearing. Maybe I'm punishing myself for letting it go on. But I'm also drawing a line. They need to know I exist. She looked at me for a long time, and I saw something in her eyes soften, then harden, a wave hitting and withdrawing. When Peter leaves them alone with his promises, she said, each word a cautious stepping stone. Don't tell me I didn't warn you. Then they'll learn, I said. And so will I. That evening, the house looked like a thrift store. Boxes open, towers of folded shirts, cords snaking across the floor. Ethan tape labeled a boxy shoes in narrow, tentative handwriting that made him look younger than he wanted to be. Lily sat cross-legged, choosing which books to leave, touching each one like a goodbye. Danielle made dinner and did not set a plate for me. I made a sandwich and ate it in the garage, leaning against the washing machine. The dryer rumbled, warm air puffing against my knees. Domesticity humming along, indifferent to human wars. Isn't that the most American sound? Machines doing what people won't. Around 9, the doorbell rang. All our bodies startled at once, like a flock rising. Ethan went to the window and peered through the blinds. It's Uncle Nate, he said. Nate is my brother, the one person in Columbus who will drive across town at night because he hears an edge in your voice and recognizes it from childhood. He stepped in, scanned the room, and took me in with a look that said, so it finally snapped. We hugged the way men do, short, firm messages transmitted through bone. He touched Ethan's shoulder, kissed Lily's head, and nodded at Danielle, polite but guarded. Old loyalties never forget their maps. You sure? He asked me later, low enough that only the refrigerator could overhear. This isn't performative? Feels like the opposite, I said. Feels like the first real thing I've done in years. He studied me, then the boxes, then Danielle in the next room flipping through the mail and not reading it. Okay, he said. Then I'll bring my truck on Wednesday. The big one. After he left, I went upstairs to the bedroom and opened the top drawer of the dresser where I keep the paperwork that proves I exist. Birth certificate, passport, the deed. Yes, the deed. My name on it. Clear as daylight. If you were wondering, did that make me want to slam the deed on the table and shout, "This is my house"? Yes, it did. But you can own a house and still be homeless. Ownership on paper is not belonging in practice. Ask anyone who's ever slept on a couch in the home they paid for. I set the deed back and took out instead a small ring of keys I'd carried since the move. Front door, back door, garage, shed, mailbox. The ring was heavy in my palm. Keys are promises we make to ourselves, that we can enter, that we are allowed, that something inside is ours. I closed my fist around them until the teeth bit into my skin. Then I slipped them back into the drawer. Not yet. I wasn't finished being the person who carried those keys. On the second day, the house quieted. The decision had soaked into the carpet. The resistance had tired itself out. We wrapped plates. The kids each shattered one by accident. We laughed awkwardly, human beings again for a few minutes, free of roles. Danielle asked if they could leave some things for when they visit. I said yes and meant it. I'm not a monster. I'm just a man who finally refused to be a ghost. There were moments when I almost reversed it. When Lily put a green sweater into the wrong box and then retrieved it like a small animal, I felt the ache shoot through me like a nail. When Ethan asked if he could keep the old Browns pennant I'd had since I was his age, the one I'd let him hang in his room, I said of course, and then sat in my car afterward and stared at the steering wheel until the dusk turned the windshield purple. How many times can a man swallow a goodbye before he forgets how to speak? The night before the drive, Danielle and I sat at opposite ends of the couch, our feet on the same rug, like two countries sharing a border and pretending not to. I could have handled it differently, she said. So could I. I didn't defend you enough. No, I said. You didn't. She flinched at the bluntness. We had lived for years in the soft fog of maybe. Honesty hit like a cold shower. She looked at the window, at the porch light making a halo on the lawn. I was afraid, she said. Of what? If I forced them to love you, they'd love me less. The words came out thin, fragile, as if they'd been waiting behind her teeth for years and weren't sure the air would take them. It was the first time she'd said anything that felt like the truth we both could stand on. I wanted to put my hand on her knee. I didn't. They don't have to love me, I said. They do have to respect me. Those two things aren't twins, she whispered. I should have taught them the difference. We sat there a long time. The refrigerator clicked off. The house sighed. Somewhere a dog barked, one of those anxious yips that never translates into action. Finally, she said, "Will you come inside when you drop them off?" "No," I said. "I'll help with the boxes. Then I'll leave." "Will you say goodbye?" "I don't know what to call it," I said, "but I'll say something." I slept an hour, maybe two. When the sky peeled itself open, a thin gray, I got up and made coffee. The kids came down with backpacks and hoodies, suburban armor. Danielle wore jeans and a sweater and no makeup, a flag lowered to half-mast. We carried boxes, Ethan and I on the heavy ones, Lily with the delicate things, Danielle hovering with a list. The driveway smelled like wet leaves. My truck idled like a patient animal. "Ready?" I asked, though that word felt obscene. No one is ever ready. We just go. We loaded in silence. The scrape of cardboard, the soft thud of lives stacked compactly enough to fit into a bed with ratchet straps. I tied the last knot and tugged twice. It held. That's all any of us can hope for, that the knots hold for as long as the road is rough. Ethan climbed into the passenger seat, Lily behind him, Danielle in her car to follow. She touched my elbow before getting in. "Drive safe." "I always do." We pulled away from the curb. The house, my house, not my house, watched us leave, blinds half drawn like eyes pretending to be asleep. The porch sagged just so. The paint needed doing again. I made a note out of habit and then threw the note away inside my head. We turned onto the main road, then to the highway. Columbus slid past in its familiar litany. Gas stations with loyalty points, a billboard for divorce lawyers offering flat fees, a church sign that said grace is for quitters too. I almost laughed. Almost. Do you think he'll be there? Lily asked after a while, voice small. He knows we're coming, Danielle said over the speaker from her car. He knows. Ethan stared out the window, jaw clenched, pretending to be a man. I let the miles do their slow work, each one removing us from what we had built and bringing us closer to what we had avoided. What would we find at Peter's place? A welcome mat? A new girlfriend's shoes by the door? A promise rehearsed in the mirror? Would you have turned back? The highway bent, the city loosened its grip, and the exits turned into neighborhoods with ornamental trees and mailboxes shaped like barns. I checked the scribbled address on the dash. Peter had texted it late last night. No apology, just a location pin and the words "I'll be around." Around. The vagueness of a man who treats presents like a favor. I took the right turn, then the left, and there it was. A rental duplex with beige siding and a plastic flamingo in the front patch of grass. The bird leaning forward as if eavesdropping. The upstairs blinds twitched. A shape moved. I parked by the curb and cut the engine. The truck hiccuped, then quieted. My heart didn't. Okay, I said, my voice a stranger. We're here, Ethan swallowed. Lily picked at a loose thread on her sleeve. Danielle's car pulled in behind us. She got out and closed her door, as if not to wake something sleeping. Upstairs, a door opened. A man stepped onto the landing, hair uncombed, t-shirt soft with old washings, a smile already rising like a reflex. Peter lifted a hand in greeting. Hey, he called down, as if this were a barbecue and not a reckoning. You made good time. I looked at my hands on the steering wheel and realized I'd been gripping it as if it were the last solid thing in a world of water. I let go. My palms had little half-moon marks from my nails. Come on, I said to the kids. Let's carry your lives up the stairs. And that is where we were suspended, feet on the curb, boxes stacked. The father who left opening his door, and the man who stayed deciding how much of his strength to spend on the climb. Would you have gone up? Or would you have done what every muscle in my back begged me to do, put the truck in gear and keep driving? I carried the first box myself, balanced against my chest, its corners pressing into my ribs. Shoes. That's what Ethan had labeled it. A boy's shoes, heavy with dirt from football practice, some too small, some barely worn. Shoes that told the story of someone growing up in front of me while never once calling me dad. I climbed the narrow staircase to Peter's apartment, each step groaning under the weight, and at the top, there he was smiling like a man who had been invited to a party instead of called to account for years of absence. Thanks, James, he said, as if I were helping him move in instead of handing him the children he had abandoned. His voice had the same casual warmth it always did. The kind that drew people in and excused everything. Some men are born with that gift, the charm that turns neglect into eccentricity. I didn't answer. I set the box down by the door, straightened my back, and went for the next one. Ethan carried a box marked clothes, his jaw tight, refusing to meet my eye. Lily followed with a backpack, her shoulders slumped. Danielle hovered by the car, arms crossed, as if to say, don't look at me. This is your doing. And maybe it was. Maybe I was cruel. Or maybe cruelty was finally telling the truth. We stacked their lives in Peter's living room boxes on a carpet that smelled faintly of mildew and stale beer. A TV flickered with a muted sports channel, and on the counter, 3 empty pizza boxes waited like old guests. Peter cracked open a soda, offered it to Ethan, who took it without hesitation. My stomach clenched at how quickly a boy can accept the gesture of a man who hasn't earned it. Appreciate you bringing them, Peter said to me. Leaning against the wall like this was casual, friendly. We'll figure it out from here. The arrogance in his ease. It made me want to hit him, not with fists, but with truth. With every night I'd stayed up with Lily's fever. With every game I'd driven Ethan to when Peter didn't show. With every bill I'd signed my name to. But instead I just nodded once, turned, and walked out. The drive back was a tunnel of silence. Danielle followed in her car. The kids didn't say goodbye. I didn't ask them to. At the house, my house, though the word felt hollow, I unloaded the last of the empty boxes and set them in the garage. The quiet when I shut the door behind me was unbearable at first. Too big, too still. That night, I wandered from room to room like a man checking on ghosts. Ethan's room, the Browns pennant still on the wall, his desk littered with pencils and crumpled notes. Lily's room, the faint smell of her lavender lotion, books half stacked, the green sweater folded neatly on her pillow, Danielle's robe hanging behind the bathroom door. And then the kitchen, the beating heart of any house, now silent as a morgue. No clatter of forks, no laughter, mocking or otherwise. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the drip of a faucet I hadn't yet fixed. I sat at the table and realized something terrifying. I didn't know what to do with freedom. Isn't that strange? You fight for it, dream of it, and then when it comes, it feels like a void. I poured myself a drink I didn't need, stared at the wood grain of the table, and asked the empty chairs, was it worth it? No answer came. Days passed. The silence softened, became something I could live inside. I woke without the sound of doors slamming. I ate when I wanted. I read in the evenings. The lamps glow a circle of sanctuary. But at night, the house seemed to ask me questions I couldn't answer. What is a man without the family he fought for? What is a home without voices? Then the messages started. First from Danielle. Short, hesitant. They're not happy. It's different than they thought. He's not consistent. Then from Ethan. Sorry, I was an idiot. Then Lily, braver in her honesty. I miss you. I didn't know I would, but I do. I ignored them at first. Pride has its own gravity. But one evening, I came home to find two figures on the porch. Ethan and Lily. No sarcasm, no defiance. Just faces pale with uncertainty. Can we talk? Ethan asked. Lily nodded beside him, clutching her phone like it might shatter if she let go. Inside, the kitchen came alive again, not with laughter, but with the weight of possibility. We sat at the table. For once, they were silent, waiting for me to speak. And in that silence, I realized the power I'd been chasing all those years had never been about money or authority. It was about voice, about being heard. So I spoke, and they listened. They sat there like defendants who had finally learned the cost of arrogance. Not handcuffed, not shamed, just emptied of certainty. The kitchen, our courtroom, and church held its breath. I could tell the exact places where their elbows always landed on the table by the worn spots in the varnish. I could tell where a hot dish had once scarred the wood into the shape of a small Ohio, a continent of heat. I could tell which chair creaked in protest when Ethan leaned back and which one made no sound at all when Lily perched on the edge, ready to run. People talk about family portraits as proof of belonging. I think a kitchen table tells you more. The bruises of use, the dents of argument, the ring left by a careless glass. Do you see how a table becomes the body that bears the rest of us? Phones? I said. One word. They understood. Lily slid her screen down into her pocket like she was lowering a flag. Ethan killed his with a long press that felt almost ceremonial. Danielle, who had followed them in and now stood by the sink as if she might need the cover of a faucet at any moment, set hers face down on the counter and didn't touch it again. I heard what you said about me, I began. No preamble, no throat clearing. I want you to hear me back. No one spoke. They leaned into the silence like sailors leaning toward a lighthouse. For years, I believed that if I gave enough, I said, I would be granted a seat at this table. I paid. I fixed. I showed up. And I told myself that one day that would translate into respect. But I was wrong. Respect is not a receipt. You don't get it stamped after a certain number of purchases. Respect is a way of seeing. Danielle's eyes filled, but she blinked the water back. Ethan's knee bounced under the table. I could feel the vibration through the wood. Lily watched my mouth as if words might land on her tongue before they reached her ears. Are you with me? Have you ever stood in your kitchen and tried to explain the architecture of your hurt to the people who built it? It's like sketching a house in the air with your finger and hoping they can see it too. I can't force you to love me, I said, and I'm done trying. But I will not, any longer, live in a house where I am invisible. If we are in each other's lives, there will be rules. Not because I enjoy rules, because I am a person. Lily spoke first, her voice so small the refrigerator almost drowned it. We were mean. Yes, I said. You were. I didn't mean, she started. You meant what you felt that day, I said, not unkindly. It wasn't a joke. It was a worldview. That's what hurt, not the words. The fact that you believed them. Ethan swallowed. There's a way teenage boys look when they are pulling a confession through a throat that has only ever shaped excuses. It's like watching a new language hatch. I was showing off, he said. I wanted Lily to laugh. I wanted to be, I don't know, in charge of a moment. Mocking me made you feel in charge, I said. Yeah, he said, and the word cracked open like bark. Danielle stepped closer, hands laced together so tightly her knuckles went white. James, she said, and my name in her mouth was softer than it had been in years, as if she had practiced holding it without dropping. I should have defended me, I finished for her. Yes, she nodded. I was afraid of losing them. By losing me, she didn't look away. Yes, we let that sit. Truth needs oxygen. If you rush it, it dies. Okay, I said finally, and drew a breath that felt like it belonged to someone braver. Here is what changes, and here is what doesn't. I took a sticky note from the small stash near the stove. I know, it sounds ridiculous, a yellow square to hold a life. But sometimes you need a thing so ordinary, it can carry a new holiness without intimidation. You know what I mean? Grand gestures look good in movies. In kitchens, a sticky note will do. I wrote, plain as nails. Respect is non-negotiable. Household is shared voice, chores, cost. I am James. Not a wallet, not a ghost. I stuck the note to the salt shaker and set it in the center of the table like a flag planted on a foreign shore. No gavel, no signatures, no swearing in. Just salt the thing you reach for without thinking made into a compass. Ethan stared at it. What does shared mean? It means I don't make dinners alone and eat them alone, I said. It means if you slam the door in my face, that slam costs you something. Not money, but consequence. It means when I speak, you look at me. It means you don't treat this house like a hotel run by an invisible staff. And if we mess up, Lily asked. Not if, when. Then you apologize with your mouth and your actions, I said. And you don't call me names to make each other laugh. They nodded, but nods are cheap. I waited. I wanted to see whether the nods carried weight. Danielle broke first. I want to cook dinner tonight, she said. All of us. Not me cooking and you two vanishing. All of us cooking and then sitting together. Even if it's bad, she tried to smile. Which it might be, because I'm rusty at cooperation. I'll chop, I said. I'll do the dishes, Ethan offered. Too quickly, but offer is not nothing. I'll set the table, Lily said very quietly, and her eyes flitted to the salt shaker and back to me. Phones stay away during dinner, I said. And so do jokes made of people. They agreed. Not with enthusiasm, with seriousness. There is a difference, and I took it as a gift. I wish I could tell you the evening that followed was miraculous. It wasn't. It was clumsy. We moved around each other like people learning to waltz in a small space. Danielle burned the onions. Ethan oversalted the sauce. Lily set one fork upside down and pretended it was on purpose. But there were also moments, small ones, that loosened something in me that had been in a fist for years. Lily asked how to hold the knife so she wouldn't cut her fingers and didn't roll her eyes when I showed her. Ethan told a story about a teammate that had no villains, just people. Danielle bumped my hip and didn't apologize, and the bump felt like a language we'd forgotten. We ate, we talked. When the silence came, it didn't scare anyone. It was simply silence, not a verdict. After, Ethan rose unprompted and began rinsing plates. Lily caught my eye, and when she smiled, it wasn't an apology and it wasn't a plea. It was small, ordinary, and undramatic. I have learned to trust undramatic things. They last longer. And then came the question I had not prepared for. Can we come back? Lily said, not looking at Danielle, not looking at Ethan, not using the plural to hide. Here, I mean. Not just for dinner, for living. The room shifted. The air found a new shape. I don't want to be punished for saying that, Ethan said, eyes locked on the sink. For what I said before, you are not being punished, I said. You are being educated. And so am I, but if you come back as residents, not occupants on a tour. And you come back understanding the note on the salt. They nodded again, this time slower. Peter says, Ethan began, and stopped. What does Peter say? I asked. That we're welcome there any time, he said. That it's chill. But he also said he's starting a second job, and he might not be around a lot, and there's a new person. And the apartment is small. Lily's voice came as a relief valve. I don't like the smell there. We all laughed a little, because sometimes the truth needs a trivial door. The smell was real. The smell was code for nothing feels held. Then here's what happens, I said. You go back, get your things. We make space. Your rooms are still yours. They always were. We make a calendar and a budget, and I paused before the word, and then used it because I needed to hear myself say it on this side of the river. We make rules, and we follow them, including me. Even you? Ethan said, trying to tease and not quite getting there. Especially me, I said. The dishes were done. The counters wiped. The sticky note stayed where I'd put it, a small treaty, fluorescent and unsubtle. Danielle leaned against the stove, chewing the inside of her cheek, the way she does when she's choosing whether to speak a sentence that might change her life. James, she said, and that soft way again, that audition for a new tone. Will you sleep here tonight? I mean in. She stopped, as if the rest of the sentence were a cliff. I looked at the chair I had been occupying for months, the indent my body had made in a cushion that should have belonged to no one in particular. I looked at the stairs, the dim breath of the hallway that could lead to a bedroom, or a guest room, or a couch, or a floor. I looked at her. I'll sleep in the guest room, I said. For now? She nodded as if a judge had handed down a fair sentence. Too many couples mistake the sudden tenderness of a crisis for reconciliation. The forgiveness that lasts is the kind that survives the boredom of next Tuesday. You know that, don't you? We did not hug. We did not turn into the people we were when we were new. We stacked plates, we ran water, we dried. In small work, mercy is possible. The next day, I left work early and stopped at the hardware store on Livingston. I bought 2 things, a pack of felt pads for chair legs and a new set of keys I could cut when I was ready. On the way out, I picked up one of those aluminum key tags with a little paper insert. On one side, it said name. On the other side, phone. I took a pen and, in careful printing, wrote kitchen table. I know, it's sentimental bordering on absurd, but I needed a way to remember that the table was the engine of our change. Not a courtroom, not a therapist's couch, not the invisible tally of receipts. Back home, I stuck the felt pads to the bottoms of the chairs. They slid easier. They made less noise. We could move toward and away from each other without scraping the floor raw. Do you see the metaphor? I didn't force it. I just pressed the circles on and felt a little lighter. We made the calendar that night. Mondays Ethan cooked. Tuesdays Lily did. Wednesdays Danielle. Thursdays me. Fridays were something from a box, and we'd sit on the floor and watch a movie that no one had to pretend to like. Saturday was for errands done together. Sunday was for the thing we'd avoided naming, conversation without agenda. I took a dry erase marker and wrote the rules on the board by the fridge in block letters. We laughed at how official it looked until laughter stopped being a weapon and became a sound again. It wasn't smooth. It never is. Ethan missed a dinner because he stayed late at practice and didn't tell anyone. When he came in, he was all apology and hunger, and I said, the apology is accepted. The hunger is yours to solve, and watched him make eggs without slamming anything. Lily forgot the trash twice, and then on the third time took every bin out and lined them up as if making amends had choreography. Danielle and I slipped once into an old argument about her phone, the who and the why, and the too late, and we stopped mid-sentence and began again. I'm afraid if my attention is on you, I won't have enough left for them, she said. I'm afraid if my attention is on them, I'll disappear, I said. We stood there with our competing fears like dogs, sniffing each other, both embarrassing and necessary. And then we did something new. We made room for both and went to bed in separate rooms without punishing each other for the separate. A week later, Ethan came into the garage where I was changing the oil in the truck, sat on the stairs, and said, "Can I learn?" He didn't say, "Teach me, Dad." He didn't say, "This is a big moment." He just asked, and I handed him the socket wrench and said, "Lefty loosey," and he laughed because some cliches are true. When the plug came free and the oil poured black and smooth into the pan, he made a sound that boys make when they do a thing that once belonged to other men. He wiped his hands on a rag and didn't flinch at the mess. "Thanks, James," he said, and something in me let go of its last vigil. Lily started taking her showers earlier in the evening because she was trying to sleep like a person. Her phrase, not mine. One night, standing in the doorway of the kitchen, she said, without looking at me, If you ever decide to leave, could you tell me first?" I was startled by the bravery of that sentence. "Yes," I said. "And if you ever decide to leave again, tell me first too." She nodded. We made a pact without shaking on it. Danielle and I began a slow grammar of attention. On Saturday mornings, we sat on the porch with coffee and spoke in declarative sentences. She would reach over to pick a loose thread from my sleeve. I would ask, "Are you happy right now?" And she would say, "I am something like happy," and we would let the something be, instead of correcting it into a more useful noun. Sometimes, after the kids went to bed, we stood in the hallway and held hands for a minute, like we were in a line for something important, and were reminding each other we wouldn't step out of it. Sometimes we fought, and instead of walking away, she would say, "Stay," and I would. Is that what justice looks like in a kitchen? Not victory, endurance with kindness. And then came the night that tied the knot without a bow. It was 2 weeks after the table treaty. We sat down to spaghetti Ethan's job, slightly undercooked, not a crime, and I set the salt shaker in the center. The sticky note was still there, the ink softening at the edges from steam and handling. "We should rewrite it," Danielle said, reaching for a fresh note. "Make it neater." "No," I said. "Let it wear." After dinner, I stood, walked to the drawer where the keys lived, and took out the ring, the heavy one. Front door, back door, garage, shed, mailbox. I separated one from the ring, the front door key, and placed it on the table. "There's something else," I said. "Something quiet." They watched. "I am not changing the locks," I said. "I am changing who holds them." I slid the key toward him. "You're old enough to carry this, but keys come with rules. You don't use it to come in loud at 3am. You don't use it to bring in what you know doesn't belong here. You don't use it as a weapon in an argument, no locking people out to prove a point. You use it to come home." His throat moved. He put his hand over the key. "Not snatching, covering. I'll carry it," he said, and the solemnity of it made Danielle press her lips together. I turned to Lily. "You'll have a key too," I said, "but I want you to choose the keychain." I held up the aluminum tag I'd bought, the one labeled kitchen table. "Write anything on it you want, a word that means something to you." She smiled, surprised. "Even if it's dumb?" "Especially if it's dumb," I said. "We'll need dumb words to save us when smart ones fail." She took the tag and held it up to the light like a small moon. "And me?" Danielle said. The bravado of the question couldn't mask the tremor underneath. "You," I said. "Already have a key." I held up the ring. "But I want something else." I went to the drawer with the papers and took out the deed. Not to threaten, to witness. I placed it on the table and didn't open it. "I need to hear you say, out loud, that this house is as much mine as it is yours. Not because my name is on a piece of paper, but because my voice is in these rooms." She met my eyes. "This house is yours," she said. She bent the sentence, then straightened it. "Not because of the deed, because you live here, because you make it lived in." She reached for my hand. I let her have it. Her palm was cool, and not as a cousin of convenience, she added. As James, the man who stayed. That was the whole of it. The climax you could miss if you were chewing too fast. No orchestral swell. No fireworks. Just a sentence spoken over a table that had held our failures and would, with luck, hold our repairs. Later, after dishes and dry hands and a sitcom laugh track we didn't pay attention to, I took a small walk through the house. Ethan's door half open, the new key shining on his desk like an oath. Lily's door closed, the pen scratching inside as she wrote a word on her tag. I would find out the next day. It said begin. Danielle in our yes. Our room, moving the extra pillow to the middle, not as a barrier, as a companion. I went to the kitchen and turned off the light. The salt shaker sat in a small circle of street lamp glow. The sticky note lifted at one corner, a flag at gentle wind. I pressed it down. Do you need a tidy ending? I can't give you one. A week after the keys, Ethan blew up at me over something small and stupid gas money I'd forgotten to leave on the counter, and said a sentence that had more old poison than new thought. He stopped halfway through, changed the ending, and apologized by driving me to the hardware store and waiting in the truck while I bought nails. Lily cried in the car because a friend didn't answer a text. I told her silence isn't always a verdict, and then, because I have learned to show more than teach, I left my own phone face down for the rest of the night. Danielle and I moved back into the same bed on Tuesday because there was nothing special about Tuesday, and the ordinary is where you should put your vows. Some mornings we kiss, some mornings we don't. We brush our teeth at the same sink and sometimes laugh with toothpaste in our mouths. We buy too many bananas and let them brown and make bread out of the mistake. Poetic justice? If there is any, it is this. The love I demanded as interest on a debt has become, slowly, the love I receive as a dividend on dignity. The house, the kitchen, the table, they have not forgiven us. They don't have to. They hold us, and we do the work. Last night, when I was locking up, I paused at the door. The new felt pads made the chair slide like a small boat. The salt shaker stood at attention. The sticky note had a grease smudge where Ethan had set his thumb down without thinking. I liked the smudge. It meant the rules had touched us. I hung the key ring on its hook and kept one key separate in my pocket. An old habit, hard to kill. I don't carry it because I'm afraid of being locked out. I carry it because there is still a boy in me who once promised himself he would never again stand on a porch and knock. I rub the teeth with my thumb until they go warm. Before I turned off the light, I took the aluminum tag Lily had left by the sugar and flipped it over. She'd written another word on the blank side, small and decisive. Stay. That's the hardest word any of us say, harder than love, harder than sorry. It's the word that asks, will you keep coming back when it isn't dramatic? Will you choose respect when you are tired? Will you listen when it would be easier to scroll? Will you feed each other when the recipe burns and the smoke alarm screams? Will you sit at a table scarred into the shape of a state and pass the salt without muttering about the past? I turn the tag back over. Begin on one side, stay on the other. Maybe that's all a house ever asks of us. If you're still with me, if you've read this far, I'll tell you what I wish someone had told me years ago when I mistook sacrifice for a key. Love that erases you is not love. It is weather. It changes, it passes, it leaves you damp and shivering and grateful for any shelter, even if the shelter is a lie. Respect. The respect is the bean that does not rot when the season does. Demand it the way you demand air. Give it the way you give water. Build your table around it. The city outside, Columbus, with its insistence on baseball caps and right turns, kept breathing. A siren flared and faded. Somewhere a dog barked without conviction. I switched off the kitchen light and let the dark take its rightful place. In the doorway, I ran my finger across the hinge I oiled years ago and felt how smoothly it received the weight of the door. That's all I want now, to receive the weight and not screech. Good night, I thought, to the chairs with their felt pads, to the salt with its treaty, to the key on its hook, to the house that had learned a new pronunciation of my name. Good night, James. The house said back, or maybe it didn't. Maybe that voice was my at last, loud enough to hear. And if this story meant something to you, if it touched you in some way and you feel it might stay with you, then please do this for me. Follow the channel. Every follow, every subscription is more than a number. It's a silent pact. It's the fuel that allows me to keep bringing you stories that have depth, that have truth, that linger. Because in the end, it's stories that connect us. And I want to keep building this journey with you. Until next time.